Hey everybody. For this video, I want to talk about this essay that I had given you to read for homework, M. Butterfly, Orientalism, Gender, and a Critique of Essentialist Identity by Dorinne Kondo. I know that this essay was confusing, probably. There's definitely some, kind of deep philosophical type stuff going on. And I'll try to explain that a little bit. But I would remind you guys that when you're doing research, you don't need to understand the entire article to use it as a source, right? If you can find one sentence from this essay that relates to something you might be saying about art or stereotypes or whatever it is, then you can use this as a source. So I know there's a lot of like confusing, vocabulary words or whatever that you guys might not have understood. And you can push yourself. You can try to look up some of those words, try to figure it out. But again, you don't have to understand every single sentence to be able to use it as a source and for it to help you expand the way that you're thinking about M. Butterfly. Okay, so I have a few quotes that I want to look at here, but before I do that, I want to take a minute to dwell on this term, essentialism. So it's in the title. They use this phrase essentialist identity, and essentialist comes from essentialism, and basically the idea here. Okay, maybe there's two ways I'll try to explain this. The first one, maybe we can think about it as relating to like gender or something, because I think that's one way that it shows up a lot in the play. So an essentialist view of gender would be that there are these categories of man and woman, and that there are like certain traits or characteristics that are essential to that category. That if you fit into this category, well, you must have these things. And obviously, we could try to give a biological answer. And I think there's an important distinction there between sex, as in biology, on one hand, and gender, as in more how we present ourselves and how we're viewed by others, and that kind of stuff, clothing and things like that. But even on the biological level, there's probably some, whatever. We're gonna have to get into that. But so yeah, an essentialist point of view, essentialism would be. It's like Gallimard, right? He believes in essentialism in this way, where he believes that, well, if you're a man, you have to be this way, and when he looks at song and it's like, oh, okay, well, if you're acting submissive and delicate and weak or whatever it is, well, then you must be a woman, right? So that's how this might work in terms of gender, but obviously you could do that with any kind of identity category, right? It would be like, well, if you're this thing, you must have these characteristics. And I think basically the argument that this essay is trying to make is that M. Butterfly is arguing against this, that it's arguing the opposite. That M. Butterfly is basically saying you can't sort people into these neat little categories. That what it means to be a man, a woman, what it means to be from the West, from the East, whatever. That these things are much more complicated than saying, oh well, you must have these characteristics then. And that reality is more pluralistic, more chaotic, and just more shifting, and not as you can't slice up reality into these neat squares. The way that we can do in our head when we think of these categories. This is kind of going back to some of the things that I said in my last video about Edward Said's essay Orientalism, and of course that is another thing that's in the title here. So you can see this essay using a lot of the stuff from the Edward Said reading that we had also. Okay, so the other way that I think essentialism gets used in this essay, the more like philosophical, the way that maybe you need to take a rip from the bong to understand it in this way. But the other, it's a more philosophical thing where instead of categories like man and woman, they're taking another binary, right, like I talked about before, which is self and the world, right? So we like the way essentialism would work in this way would be the idea that I think we kind of commonly people have this idea that there's something about us that makes us who we are. That there's something inside of us that you know, you were just born with, and that's who you are. And you know, if you were born 1,000 years ago, if you were born on the other side of the world, whatever it is, you would still have what makes you you. Um, and in this way, we can neatly separate the self, you know, us, from everything else, from the world, right? So just like with gender, this article's trying to say that M. Butterfly complicates this binary categorization, that it blurs these lines, and that it tries to show us that who we are is much more constructed by culture, by history, by politics. I would add by economics. This essay doesn't really get into that, but yeah, basically that who we are is more a result of the context that we live in than anything essential inside of us, right? That's why they use the term essentialism. So that's kind of the more philosophical meaning of essentialism, the more metaphysical meaning of essentialism. And basically, that's why, you know, in the title it's a critique of essentialist identity. The argument here is that M. Butterfly doesn't allow us to have these neat categories, whether it's man, woman, whether it's west, east, whether it's self and world. Okay, so I don't know, maybe that makes some sense. I'm going to go through some quotes here, though. The first one is on page 7. So yeah, this is kind of where they're, I guess, setting up their thesis. So on page 7, there's a quote here. It says, "Rather than a bounded essence filled with inner truth separated from the world or society by an envelope of skin, M. Butterfly opens out the self to the world, softening or even dissolving these boundaries." So again, I know that there's a lot of confusing words here, but it's just like I was saying. It's basically what the argument is, that M. Butterfly shows us that who we are, the self, is not sealed off from the rest of the world around us. That yeah, it's more of a it's kind of like nature versus nurture. You know, this is, you know, I think the way that the author here is trying to say is more complicated, maybe more philosophical. But I think we're all familiar with the nature versus nurture thing. You know, if you've taken a psychology class of like, well, is someone just that way because that's how they were born? Or is it the environment that they grew up in that makes them that way? I think this is kind of a more sophisticated version of that. And they're basically saying that M. Butterfly is more on the side of nurture in that case, right? Okay, let's keep going. So I don't want to say too much about this part, but the whole beginning where they're analyzing Madame Butterfly, or Madama Butterfly, as they refer to it here, which is, again, the Puccini opera, 1904, right? Madame Butterfly, M. Butterfly, let's keep that straight. And I think basically the point of talking about Madame Butterfly here is to show how Madame Butterfly totally embraces these categories and treats them as natural and you know, just the way things are, right? Well, Butterfly in Madame Butterfly, you know, she has to, you know, do this honor suicide thing, you know, because that's what Asian women do, and she fits into that box, so that's how it goes. Which is obviously bullshit, of course, but basically it's saying that that's the message that the old opera sends, you know, that these categories are impossible to escape from, right? And clearly Gallimard, that's how Gallimard takes it, right? That's how he understands. It for sure. So just to give a quote to this, on page 11, the author writes, in Madame Butterfly, identities are viewed as fixed, bounded entities containing some essence or substance expressed in distinctive attributes. And again, that's probably a more complicated way of saying that, like, you know, it believes in the stereotypes. It thinks that if you fit into this category, then you must have these attributes. Basically, Madame Butterfly fully endorses all of these stereotypes and embraces them. And then, obviously, the argument with M. Butterfly is that it does the opposite. So there's a way here of explaining, like, why M. Butterfly is so obsessed with Madame Butterfly, why this, you know, an opera that was written 80 years before M. Butterfly is published plays such a big role in it. Is because M. Butterfly is, like, specifically arguing against. It's trying to give basically the exact opposite message of Madame Butterfly. All right, let me see here. I'm going to go to page 15. Okay, so they're talking about Gallimard here, um, and I think that there's a few good quotes of just trying to kind of like explaining his situation and the things he believes and how boxed in he is because of his beliefs and these stereotypes. So just to give a quote from that on page 15, talking about Gallimard, it says he inhabits a prison of cultural conventions and stereotypes, where Gallimard's insistence on reading a complex, shifting reality through the Orientalist texts of the past makes him the prisoner and eventually the willing sacrificial victim of his own culturally and historically produced conventions. And yeah, I think that goes along with something that we've been saying a lot of this time. That, yeah, Gallimard basically sees the events of his life through the lens of Madame Butterfly, right? And I think that's what they're talking about when they say the Orientalist texts. I think they're talking about Madame Butterfly and other stuff too, but definitely Madame Butterfly there. Um, and yeah, just again, because the point being that reality is never so simple. Reality is never as easy as just mapping these categories onto the world. That these are things we make up in our heads and then try to impose on reality to give it a sense of order, and so we can understand it better and stuff. And yeah, it's just not true. It just doesn't work that way. Reality, like they say here, is always more complex, more shifting. Okay, I want to go to page 16. I have another quote to look at here. This one has to do with more with song, and this is something I wanted to emphasize maybe a little more too, was just the way that song like weaponizes these stereotypes against Gallimard. Like song is lying, song is taking advantage of Gallimard, like the whole play, right? But the only reason it's possible is because Gallimard is so committed to these stereotypes. So I don't know if we blame song for that. Like I don't know if that becomes a bad thing to do or whatever. Okay. So to speak to that, here's a quote on page 16. It says, Song strategically exhibits the appropriate signs of her inner essential Oriental female self: modesty, embarrassment, timidity. So yeah, this is just going to the point that I tried to highlight, especially with like the end of Act One, um, when Song is saying these things like, oh, my little heart gives me away or whatever, and I try to be strong like a Western woman, but I can't, um, and that basically, yeah, Song does this strategically. I think was the interesting thing, just like how conscious Song is. That Gallimard is indoctrinated with these stereotypes and how Song uses that against him, and that's the only reason that it works really. That's the only reason Song is able to pull this off. That's the only reason that it's not even that hard. I think Song says. Okay, here's another quote. Okay, this goes to something I was talking about. They're looking here at this. Yeah, this is a quote that I highlighted when Gallimard talks about how he's feeling for the first time the absolute power of a man, right? And this happens when he stops talking to Song, when he won't answer her letters and that kind of stuff. So it says here on page 17. Huang highlights the connection between this power and the existence of a symmetrical but inverted opposite. For though presumably Gallimard was by most people's definitions a man, before he met his butterfly, he can only acquire the absolute power of a man in contrast to her. So this goes directly back to something we talked about, one of the quotes from Orientalism, where it talks about how the West gained in power and confidence and stuff by setting itself off against an opposite, right? And yeah, that's the thing here, is that the only reason Gallimard is able to feel the absolute power of a man is because he has set Butterfly up as the absolutely powerless woman, you know, so that like basically Gallimard needs the bottom half of the binary so that he can be the top half of the binary, right? Between man and woman, west and east, and that kind of stuff. All right, very good, very good. So some of this is maybe just going along with things that I've said before. Maybe I unconsciously, am just plagiarizing this essay whenever I talk about M. Butterfly. But again, I think any of these quotes could appear in whatever kind of essay you're writing about the play. Um, so yeah, just one more quote on page 20. Perhaps what Huang might further emphasize is the inadequacy of either gender category to encompass a paradoxical and multiplicitous reality. So again, the idea of these categories and they're just not sufficient, and that reality is never really black and white; it's always shades of gray. You know. All right, I think I just have a couple more that I want to hit here. Page 21. Oh, here's a good quote. It says on page 21, Gallimard has too little imagination to accept the complexity and ambiguity of everyday life, too little imagination to open himself up to different cultural possibilities, blurred boundaries, and rearrangements of power. So yeah, that's I think they're going off of that line where Song, what one Song reveals to be a man. Um, they say to Gallimard, well, you have too little imagination or something, because Gallimard immediately doesn't care about Song anymore, and chases Song off the stage and stuff. And this is kind of their explanation for that Gallimard, the reason that he doesn't have enough imagination, because basically he's not able to think outside of these pre-established categories that are supposed to be natural, right? Yes. Okay. So one more last quote here on page 26. I know this was a pretty long essay, but again, I'm trying to help you guys out with the research here. All right, page 26 says, far from bounded, coherent, and easily apprehended entities, identities are multiple, ambiguous, shifting locations and matrices of power. And I think that is what they're trying to say is the message that M. Butterfly sends, right? That identities are not, that they can't be chalked up to these simple categories, and that instead they are multiple, ambiguous, and shifting. There's this interesting quote that I think relates here. It comes from Walt Whitman, the poet, in his long poem "Leaves of Grass," where he says, there's a line. I contain multiplicities. It's something like, I contradict myself. Very well, then I contradict myself, for I am large and I contain multiplicities. And I think that poem is trying to make a similar point about identity, right? That you can't really pin down, one thing to say this is who I am. That we're always kind of adapting and changing. And if you think of who you were 5 years ago, 10 years ago, in what ways are you the same person? In what ways have you changed? Is there anything? Is there anything there? Is there any there that makes us who we are, or are we just kind of shifting and adapting based on where we are in our lives, the people that we meet, the influences on our lives, all of these things. So I think we can sum up the argument here by saying that the argument that this essay is making about M. Butterfly by saying that M. Butterfly shows that identity categories are culturally, historically constructed and are not natural. Because I think that's, this idea of this stuff being natural, I think that's what a lot of people appeal to. They're like, that's where a lot of these stereotypes, like how people try to explain them. They're like, well, that's just how it is, men are this way, women are this way, and that's just science, or that's just evolution, or whatever it is. It's natural, right? It comes from nature. And I think the argument here is that M. Butterfly says that these identity categories are not natural, that they are constructed by culturally, by things like art, by things like magazines, by things like the people that at school, like we see in the play, right? I'm thinking of the specific examples in the play of where they kind of show us where stereotypes come from, with the flashbacks with Gallimard, with the places that he like receives these stereotypes and stuff. So yeah, that the play is trying to show us that that these categories don't work. That basically, and I think that's part of the ending too, where Gallimard is now Madame Butterfly. Where now he's wearing the kimono and the wig and everything like that. And it's like, well, he can be that, and Song can be, wearing a tuxedo and being the one who's powerful and all these things. That their identities do not keep them in one place. That these things can switch and change, and that who we are is not stable, is not static. It's more fluid than that. So yeah, I think that's kind of the argument here. If it's related to how we've been talking, like stereotypes basically be, yeah, that the play shows us that stereotypes are wrong and harmful and bullshit and stuff like that. All right, so I hope there's something that you can use to this from this essay to help you with your research. And I'll talk to you more soon.